Hello. Welcome all. I think everybody's filing in. Oh, yeah. There it is. Oh my gosh. Heart reactions. Oh, look at this. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for the folks at Financial Sense for having. I got to close chat. This is just going to be much too distracting. Thank you to the team of Financial Sense for having me here to talk about AI and what all this stuff is and what's happening. I want to save time for Q&A at the end because the reality of giving any talk about Q&A is you usually end the talk with more questions than you start the talk with, and that's just how it goes. So as we're going, feel free to chuck questions into the Q&A. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my slides here. And if you hear what sounds like stampeding wild animals, that is just my children. That's my life. Okay, so let's talk about it. ChatGPT. As of this date and time, October 25th at 3:35 p.m. In fact, it's probably already out of date because they made me submit these slides last week. But this is the way with AI. Everything's obviously changing super, super fast. But it has a huge impact on the ways that we work. We got folks like Financial Sense building it into their product in really cool ways. So we're going to talk about a number of things, but one of them is, do I just wait for all my tech partners to build it in? Can I just do that? Because that would be a whole lot easier. Or do I need to actually learn some aspect of it, right? You are on the scale track. You're in the right place. Today's agenda. You're also going to see some AI generated imagery here. Don't worry about it. If you try to count fingers or toes, it's just gonna get weird. I'm just gonna tell you right now. Okay, why do I need to worry about this? 2, a tour of ChatGPT's various models, what they have right now. 3, a look at some ChatGPTs that aren't ChatGPT. What? Understanding security. 5, practical applications. And 6, how do I actually do this in a team environment and ensure that, like, my team isn't putting stuff into the model that they shouldn't be, right? So 6 things that we're going to cruise through. I'm actually going to flip the script here real quick because there's one more thing that's a really exciting announcement. Super secret partnership with Financial Sense. So secret that they actually don't even know that I'm about to show you this. Let's see here. I know most of you are here for the hair product recommendations, but we're actually working on a line of fragrances together, Financial Sense, that'll be released later this year. Isn't that fun? AI stuff, man. AI stuff. It is weird. It's weird. And some of the weirdness is like what we're going to talk about today, even like how do we navigate not knowing if the things that we're seeing are even like real anymore, right? Okay, enough of that. Okay, so pleasure to meet you. If we haven't met before, I make content online for accounting firm owners. I used to run a practice in Oregon, a team of about 40. We did tax prep and the normal accounting practice stuff. Okay. You're telling me that there's yet another thing I need to learn? Why does this keep happening? I just want to be an accountant, right? Goodness gracious. How many times has this happened now? From COVID relief to tech in general, cloud adoption, whether we like it or not, I feel like especially when it comes to SMBs, accountants are kind of the like tech geeks behind the scenes. Like whether they're using QuickBooks or whatever that first accounting system is, usually that's like their first CRM. It's their first invoicing system. And we end up just getting pulled into all of this stuff, which obviously isn't what we got into business to do, but is also a great opportunity. And much like how the transition to cloud, man, it ended up being accountants that drove a ton of that. I think the transition to AI may kind of follow the same trajectory. Okay, so five kind of reasons why we need to be paying attention to this, like what's changed, what's happening. 1, language models just got really good, really fast, and they're about to get much better. So the whole GPT thing was a surprise to everyone. Now, there had been past versions of GPT that were okay, but 3.5 and 4 specifically, the latest language models from OpenAI were way better than anybody anticipated. This is kind of like a brute force approach to AI. Just generate some text. And that text that it turns out that it generates has a whole ton of applications, from like generating task templates to obviously the ways that we work with it in ChatGPT. And it's about to get way better. I mean, this month, Google is supposed to release Gemini, its new language model that is trained on supposedly 3 times the data of GPT-4. Supposed to be better at it, better than GPT-4 at most tasks. And that's something that we can get, like, that could be coming any day now. So we're in this really weird, like, time of transition, I guess, where things are changing faster than we can really keep up with them. I would argue that we're actually still a long ways from mainstream adoption. Obviously, we saw the news stories about how many people were using ChatGPT, and fastest growing consumer product of all time. But like, my mom doesn't use ChatGPT. Like, I feel like we're still a long ways from it being normalized. But I'm actually thinking what will probably get us there is our smartphone assistants. And I don't know about you. Right now, my smartphone assistant isn't feeling particularly smart. Like, you almost have to know what tasks it will do and ask it to do specific things for it to be helpful. But man, when we start pulling large language models into, I won't say the name of the assistant, but the various assistants that we use, that's going to fundamentally change a lot of things, especially when those things can see into our work, into our calendar, into our personal lives, into our email. That's going to change a lot of how we use language models. So I think that smartphone adoption, like the thing that's probably going to take that mainstream in a big way, will be that. In fact, this week, there was a leak from Apple, who's been pretty quiet about their AI strategy, that they're actually rebuilding Siri right now. Oh, I did it. Rebuilding it right now around their own custom language model. So that, like, that stuff is just around the corner. And my mom is probably going to be terrified. Number 3, things are about to get weird, like really weird. So a couple weeks ago, I trained an AI model on basically a clip of me on my podcast. So I created a model of myself. The tool I used is called HeyGen, all one word. Took less than 10 minutes. I sent it basically one of the videos from my podcast, but then I gave it a 10-second audio clip. So from that podcast, I took just a 10-second audio clip and I gave it to that model. And it returned a video of me saying that 10-second audio clip. And when I put that alongside the actual 10-second video of me saying that thing, that's what you're seeing here side by side, I put this in front of my wife of 9 long years, and she couldn't tell the difference. My wife, I mean, she got LASIK a few years, like, there's no excuse. She couldn't tell the difference. And it's really weird. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, something that was really hot was these little, it's like mobile apps that would animate these pictures of your ancestors. So you put a picture of like great-great-granddad in his military uniform, and it would like animate his face, and he would talk, and it was like, oh, great-granddad came back to life. It's like, no, he didn't. That's not how he would talk like that. You can't actually have a conversation with him. It was this novelty. But if you think about what goes into creating something that feels really real, there's 2 sides of it. There's the visual and the audio. And like, man, we're there. Like, this is the worst that it's ever going to be, and it's here. So you got the visual and the audio, but then you got, what would it be like to talk with this person? And these days, we are more documented than anybody else, you know, anyone in civilization. Like, the number of emails we write, the messages we send, we are so like hyper documented. If you've ever tried to get ChatGPT to write in your tone of voice or in the tone of voice of a writer that it's been trained on, you know, it's pretty darn good. And so in my case, as an example, I run a daily podcast called Jason Daily, where we talk about accounting firm stuff. And I got 120 episodes of me talking about accounting firm stuff that can be trained into an AI model for someone to be able to sit down and have a conversation with it about accounting firms that is pretty much as good as the real deal. It's not the real deal, but man, it is pretty darn close. So if you think about where we are today, the fact that somebody can sit down and do that, like that is wild. And if you think about this and the fact that this is the worst that it's ever going to be, the reality is we look back at that example a couple years ago of animating, your ancestor. That generation is the last generation of people for whom we will not be able to have true to life conversations with an avatar of that individual long after they're gone. My kids will be able to talk with a 40-year-old version of me, a 50-year-old version of me, a 60-year-old version of me long after I'm gone. And this stuff, this is the state of things today. Think about where we're going to be in a decade and a couple of decades. That's pretty wild, right? And what it's starting to do is kind of blur the lines between, oh, shoot, like this is an AI, this is a person, and this is an AI that is trained on this person, and like the entirety of the things that they've said and their appearance and their likeness and all that. And what is really weird is how those two things are starting to blur. Now, another thing that makes this problematic is we're going to start investing in these personal assistants. And so this is a shot from my podcast. I'm talking with an AI app called Pi by a company called Inflection. They've gotten $1.3 billion in investment to build the personal assistant of your dreams. And the novel thing about Pi, specifically on the iOS app right now, just the letters PI, is it does speech like back and forth really quickly. It is like a supernatural conversation. There's no delay. You don't have to type into a chat box. You're just talking with it. And the model behind it isn't super impressive. It's not as capable as ChatGPT. But when you talk with that thing, it is weird. That is something you just have to experience. The first time you have an actual conversation with it, it is like a really bizarre experience that's just fundamentally different. And the big party trick with Pi, what it will do that the others do not do right now, is it never forgets a single thing that you tell it. Think about that. We're used to ChatGPT where those conversations are ephemeral, right? What does it mean when that AI assistant will never forget a single thing that you tell it? Well, I can tell you that it means that thing starts becoming an investment. Imagine once you have spent 12 months with this. It's not unlike hiring an intern and training them and getting them to do stuff for you. The difference is the intern always forgets what you tell them. But imagine spending a year with this thing, what an asset that becomes when it is an assistant to you in your personal life, when it's an assistant to you in your work life, when it can see the things on your computer and the stuff that you work on. Imagine that after a year, after 36 months, after 5 years, how valuable that thing is going to be. That starts getting really complicated because who owns that then? That, I don't know what you want to call it, but that essence of you that has been trained into that thing. Who has rights over that, right? Things get really weird. Now, last, this is a clip from the movie Creator. Came out 3 weeks ago. I don't know, maybe 4 weeks. Killer sci-fi flick. A ton of fun. The basic storyline is humans are at war with AI, but the AIs are all like these robots. And it includes this visual, kind of like Star Wars, like the trash compactor coming in, right? And in the context of the movie, it is a deeply, deeply unsettling visual because you've got these robots trying to clamber out of this trash compactor. And it's super uncomfortable, really weird. But why? Right? They're just robots. It's just AI. There's a line in the movie. They say, these aren't people. It's just software. And we know that's the case, right? But this is starting to get really weird and much more complex. You go back to the situation of you spending years with this thing and learning everything about how you work. Oh, I don't want that going into a trash compactor. We start thinking about the identities of people and how if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, this is all that we would have. This is what would be left, right? It starts getting really weird and really complex. And that's unsettling. like really uncomfortable in a way that I don't know how to process right now. But all of this is to say, stuff is changing in a way that kind of breaks your brain. And we have to challenge our understanding of what automation and technology and all these things has meant in the past, because this is something that is fundamentally different, that is going to create loads of social issues, loads of opportunities, and can be super overwhelming. But ultimately, what I have to focus on is I still have people to help. I have clients that rely on me, and I can either fixate on how messy and messed up and problematic all this stuff is going to be, or I can focus on being useful a day at a time. And that's where I'm at right now. Is all this stuff is really interesting, and I want to find ways for it to make me more productive, but I can get really distracted and it can like get really existential really fast. So instead, how can I just focus on being useful a day at a time? Honestly, like that is the only framework I know that works for me right now. So, with that being said, for me, I kind of have to like almost break my brain to open it to then get into like, geez, okay, how do I think about change management and what this means for my firm and all of that? So, with all that being said, let's get super specific, super contextual, actual rubber meets the road. How do we start using this stuff? So where do we fit into all this stuff? My kind of like, I don't know, recommendations over the top. Stop trying to predict what's next. Goodness gracious. We don't know. And that's totally okay, right? Like, we don't know. I wish I did know, and I wish I could plan all that stuff, but I just got to stay focused on like what my clients' needs are now and how I can use this stuff to be more productive and continue to help them. Two, we got to be curious and open-minded. We got to create the space to play with this stuff because it is such a big change. It may ultimately be a bigger investment in learning than anything that you've done before. Like if you think about how accountants of yore trained and invested in themselves, it was like they go to a conference once or twice a year, or they do the annual, like if you do tax, you do like the annual tax update once a year, and that was your continuing education. Man, stuff is changing way faster than that. AI stuff aside, I mean, like a tool like Financial Sense, how much stuff changes within a year, like in 12 months? A ton. So like that learning cycle just really doesn't work anymore. Three, an investment in yourself is an investment in your clients. So we think about how this impacts what we do in our firms. This same stuff impacts all the people we work with as well. And that's something that we need to be thinking about. Ultimately, as you are learning about this stuff, man, share your journey with your clients. Share the stuff that you're learning and figuring out because they're going through this process right now. Fourth, learn a community with others. Like stop trying to do it all yourself. Spin up a group chat, a Slack channel, Discord, Teams, whatever. Find other people who are curious. I mean, this group, literally these people in chat who are taking their time out of work to come watch an AI thing, like that is a great place to start. Find where people are learning and sharing the journey and do that with them. And man, just focus on being useful one day at a time because you go much further than that. And I don't know how to do it. Okay. ChatGPT right now is absolutely the best AI chat experience there is, bar none, like no contest. Now, I like to tease accountants that you can tell them like, wow, we're going through this amazing, like civilization altering change, right? Like it's crazy. And accountants are like, oh yeah, wow, yeah. And you're like, GPT plus is $20 a month. And accountants are like, I did 20 dub. Maybe if it was 15, gang, get over it. Please splurge for the ChatGPT plus. I'm not making any money on this. But the models you get access to with the paid version are so much better than the free version. Like, please don't let that get in your way. A quick tour of the stuff you get access to right now and what's most helpful specifically for people who do what we do. The default, when you pull that up, if you see in the top right there, you've got 3.5 and 4. 4 is the latest model, the one that you get access to on the paid version. Absolutely the one that you want to be using. This is still the frontier, the best large language model in general, like of any of them. So by default, you're going to see default is selected. And that's just you can chat with it and do anything. Next option there is browse. And what that means is when you chat with it, it will go out and pull something from the internet to answer the question, or you can actually give it links for it to go out and grab that stuff. So you may have heard language models, their training data cutoff is like a ways in the past. So how's this ever going to be helpful for me with like current event stuff or stuff that's happened since then? With GPT-4, that training data cutoff was September of 2021. So if I'm a tax pro and I'm trying to figure out something for 2022 taxes, how's this ever going to be helpful for me? This is where the browse model can close that gap because it can pull in current events. And even better, it gives you control over where it fetches that information. And this is a really important thing to understand about language models, is they are not a knowledge base. They are a way to make word over knowledge base when you provide the knowledge base. So like, I'm never going to go to ChatGPT and look for factual things, because the same thing that is hallucination is creativity. Like, those are the exact same things. And so if, for example, I'm trying to get a technical tax answer and I know the authoritative source, I need to give it the authoritative source and say, help me go through this document and pull out the most relevant bits to this question. Notice how I'm not telling it to give me an answer. I'm telling it to go through the authoritative stuff that I chose, just like a human researcher would, and like pull out excerpts, like verbatim excerpts from that, so that it's basically doing what I would do and saving me some time and having to go through all of that myself. The third option you see here, advanced data analysis. This thing is 50% of the time absolutely unbelievable. The other 50% of the time completely useless. Basically what it does is it will write code to perform your task. So for example, one thing we did in my newsletter a couple months back was you can upload files to this model. And so I would upload a balance sheet and P&L, and I instructed it on how to write a 2 to 3 minute video script that I could read to deliver those financials. And I didn't just say, create a script. Like, I'm not going to rely on it to do it the way that I would want it done. What I did was, when I was in practice, I actually had a really detailed out methodology that I had my staff use when they would do video deliveries of financials. So on the balance sheet, you are always going to reference cash and relative change. You're always going to reference XYZ. On the profit and loss, you're always going to reference these things. You will sometimes reference these things. If there's a big change, like, you'll reference this or that. And so I got really explicit in that document with my staff. Well, that's the same thing I'm going to ask it to do. And it absolutely did go through, and it does this reliably, really well, and generates, a 2 to 3 minute script of the actual data that I've given it from the financial statements. Now, you clenched up a bit there when we started talking about giving data to a language model. We're going to talk security next. Plugins. Oh, man, plugins are like the Wild West right now. It is the ability of it to like go out and talk with third-party services, and there's over 1,000 plugins right now. Very early days, hard to filter through what is useful and what is not useful. I did a video on my YouTube channel a couple months back that's not too hard to find, where I highlighted like my 10 favorites at the time. But plugins is interesting because anybody can develop a plugin for ChatGPT. That could be your tax research app, could be your practice management system. Like, anybody can develop a plugin that you can use with ChatGPT. And then DALL-E 3 is the new image generation model. And if you're looking for a good time, that's pretty fun. Recent stuff ChatGPT introduced, you can now upload images to it and talk with images. Longer term, this is going to have a big impact on our OCR workflows. If you know anything about OCR, you know it's like handwritten stuff. It's useless. OCR can't do it, right? These language models will actually do handwritten text really well. So the capabilities of those go well beyond what we get from traditional OCR. And I don't have access to this yet, but soon we should be getting access to voice, the ability to talk back and forth with it and build a true relationship with artificial intelligence. But wait, there's more. So ChatGPTs that aren't even ChatGPT, other ones you may have heard of, Claude 2 by Anthropic. This one's free. This one's party trick is that it will, it can remember much, much more. It has a much larger context limit. That is, so ChatGPT right now, for example, in its current form in the ChatGPT app, can remember about 5 pages of text before it starts forgetting the oldest stuff. Claude right now can remember about 150 pages of dense text. So for example, let's just say, hypothetical, you got a big stupid piece of legislation that's super, super long and hard to understand and all of that. AI is really good if you chuck that whole thing in there. If you throw it a question like, tell me everything in here that applies to 1099s or 401k contributions, and it'll actually pull out the stuff most relevant to you. I don't know that it's ultimately a replacement for like you doing your own due diligence. At the very least, it is a really helpful second set of eyes to make sure that you didn't miss anything. Second one here is Pi. We talked about that one. That is the best voice-based assistant right now. And then third, Microsoft Bing Enterprise Chat. Bless Microsoft in the way they name things. So Enterprise Chat is something that if you use Microsoft 365, you probably already have access to without even realizing it. It is a totally secure inside of your Microsoft organization chat experience where the data is not used to train the models or anything like that. The only problem is right now, Microsoft's Bing chat experience, it's okay, not great. It's quite a bit worse than ChatGPT and Claude, but hopefully that'll get better. Okay, what about security? First things first, like off the top, like to keep in mind, regardless of the underlying security of the language model or any cloud app that you use, don't give that system more information than it needs. So think about anonymization and substitution. Using the example of the financial statements. If I'm going to chuck financial statements into a language model, you sure don't need the business's name on them. Now, there's a whole bunch of different governing bodies that have their own rules for what private documents are, private information is. But according to HIPAA, to California's privacy rules, if that information is anonymized and it can't be tied back to a person or a business, it generally isn't considered sensitive information. Now, that doesn't mean that that should be okay in your firm, but that is an agreed upon threshold where if you're looking at like general consensus or around what that would be, generally anonymized information is not sensitive. But this is why you as a firm owner need to be thinking about, okay, I understand that like this is the standard. What do we want like our rules to be? Like where do we want to set that bar? Because you absolutely need to have a document inside of your firm that governs the okay and not okay ways to use AI. And I get how this feels restrictive, but it's actually not. It's the opposite. You want to define like, here are all the apps and all the right ways to use them for sensitive types of information and non-sensitive types of information. Because a lot of the stuff we could chuck in there, like, who cares? Like, it's not sensitive at all. But you need to put that document together to liberate your team to define what the boundaries are so that they can start using that stuff. Because, man, laziness is the mother of invention. Like, whether you've given them permission or not, people are probably already using that stuff. So let's try to like give them a way to use it responsibly. Now, when it comes to security and AI, all the normal rules apply. All of the due diligence you would do for a cloud app normally, you still need to do with this stuff like, can I permanently delete my data? Can I enforce like multi-factor authentication? That's how most data breaches happen, is somebody being able to log in who shouldn't be in there. The only real language model specific stuff you need to be looking out for are the prompts used to train the model. That is, when I send a prompt to ChatGPT or something, is that prompt used to then improve the model and it's like trained into it. Now, ChatGPT, for example, right now, by default, when you go out to ChatGPT, your prompts are used to train the model. But under settings, there's a privacy setting you can enable that will turn this off. I can't give you like an absolute answer for this because stuff changes over time. I will say right now, stuff's generally trending in the more secure direction that is more in our favor. But that's the one AI specific thing to be looking out for. Okay, practical applications. And then I want to do some Q&A because I know all this creates a ton of questions. If you haven't done this stuff yet, like the way to get started, and it's so hard to give an AI talk because you have people on like massive ends of the spectrum. Yesterday, I was on a webinar with the AI CPA and they polled how many people had used ChatGPT, and it was like less than 50% of people. I'll go and talk in person and it's like you have them raise your hand and it's like 95% of people. So here's some general stuff. Hopefully everybody can pick up some tidbits. The main thing is you just got to go play with it. Like you just got to go take it for a spin with non-sensitive stuff. Like that's just how you learn. But writing is something that it can be really helpful for generating a draft, rewriting something if you don't like the tone, building out an outline, using it as an editor. Writing is probably where I still use it most. I also use it a lot for ideation, generating names for things. When I go to post to social media, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll take a transcript from my podcast and I will drop it in there and say, give me the 10 most impactful concepts from that podcast. And it will like summarize that with quotes. And that's a great jumping off point for me to outline something or write something quickly and to kind of get over that writer's block. Other stuff, scripting, like you want to write an Excel macro, super helpful for that. Troubleshooting, explain like I'm 15, the kind of stuff you're too embarrassed to ask about. Extracting structured data. Let's say you got a report and it's just a PDF report and you need it in this other format. Language models are incredibly good at this. Like actually with bank statements, they're phenomenal. If I copy and paste the text of a bank statement in there and say, give me a CSV with date, description, and amount columns, GPT-4 now will do that pretty much flawlessly. And so to think through the security ramifications of that, okay, I'm going to copy and paste that into the model. What do I need to copy and paste? Well, just the transactions. Like don't grab all the other information on the statement. You don't need to grab the business name, the address, and the account number and all that. In general, for transactions, merchant descriptions are the same for everybody. There's some banks that will put like a full account number in there if you're doing a wire or something like that. So if you're putting it in the model, look at what you're putting in there. Like don't just blindly paste it and redact any stuff that's identifying or sensitive. But boy, I spent way too many years in the early days like keying stuff in, like having to get something from one format to another. The whole PDF export to Excel thing is just awful, right? Because it gives you 100 columns and rows, and that's something language models do really well. Another thing to think about, and then we'll get to the Q&A, how do you get your team on board? Start with the policy document. Create a feedback loop for how people can share their journey, what they're learning, like successes that they're having. And that could just be like a channel in your team chat app or I don't know, weekly meeting or something like that. But share that stuff so that everybody can kind of grow together and pick that stuff up on the fly. Okay, let's do Q&A. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, I'm going to go to the most recent questions because I know there's going to be a lot of security questions at the top and we address that at the end. Katrina, which AI do you view to be the quote unquote safest offering right now? Safest is probably Bing Chat Enterprise if you use Microsoft 365. That is data that's totally contained within your system. The trade-off there is right now it's not a super performant model, but it is absolutely the safest version right now. So I would, if you use Microsoft, I would check that out and like stay plugged into the quality of those. And I'm hopeful that that will improve. Actually, on the 1st of next month, Microsoft is launching like its flagship AI product, Microsoft 365 Copilot. You're going to have a chat assistant in your Excel. You're going to have this like over-the-top chat assistant that can see into your emails and your team chats and files and all that. And you can chat with it and like get in on a Monday and be like, hey, summarize my most urgent emails. Or help me prepare for this meeting in a half an hour with a specific person. And it'll pull like most recent communications and stuff like that in a really helpful way. So that one's just around the corner. We'll see how good it is at launch. But as with all things AI, like this is the worst that it will ever be. I understand that it is showing you Q&As, and I don't know which ones or how to change which one it's showing. Let's see. Let me pull another one here. Difference between free and pro ChatGPT. I'll handle that one next. Difference between free and pro ChatGPT. The free ChatGPT, all you get is the old model and just the default model you can chat back and forth with. That's it. The pro version, you get the newest language model, which is much more performant, and all the other stuff we talked about, like plugins, the data analysis model, image generation, if that's important to you. But the biggest thing there is you're getting access to the best model, GPT-4, not GPT 3.5. Tosin, you're welcome to chuck questions up on screen there. I imagine you're the wizard behind the curtain there. If we all use ChatGPT for content writing, aren't our sites going to end up having the same content? Yeah, good question. So right now, if I went out and I asked ChatGPT, or I told it I run an accounting firm, write the copy for my landing page, it's going to give me something super generic because it's trained on everything. And so the output by default is kind of the average of everything, right? But I would say the same rules apply to accounting, right? Like we all know the same stuff, but our job is to apply our skills to a specific type of person and problem. And you can come to a language model with that same nuance. You can say, I only work with professional ballet dancers and I'm super into Slipknot. Like what is that? What is that specificity that gets your clients excited? And if I'm going to generate a landing page, like do it through the lens of that specificity, right? So when we think about the content we're writing, I don't think we will be using ChatGPT to just write something. Like that's kind of valueless, I think. Like you definitely need to take control there, but do it, in a specific tone of voice for a specific type of person. Just avoid that stuff being general. How can you tell if a ChatGPT response is accurate? I don't think I use ChatGPT in a way to where I ever ask it for factual things. So that's probably just something you need to avoid in general. If I'm using it for like research or something like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it like the link to an IRS publication and ask it for direct quotes and where those quotes are. I'm not going to go and ask it like, I don't know, something factual, because at the end of the day, it can hallucinate. GPT-4 is much better than the previous model 3.5 at not hallucinating. And there's also ways to build in the product, like ways to remediate this. So for example, Google Bard, their main language model right now, which is okay, not as good as the ones we've discussed. It actually now has a built-in fact check feature. So it will give you a response, but then there's a button there where you can ask it to fact check what it just gave you. And it will go back out and Google search and see, can I find sources to confirm that thing that I just told you? Which is kind of interesting, right? And it'll actually highlight the various statements in that response and say, yep, I verified this with these sources. Nope, I couldn't verify these. And this one was kind of in the middle. So if you think about like an AI tax research tool, something like that would be super cool. Ultimately, I don't know that we want AI to give us answers. I think what we want is it to research the way a human would and give me the information I need to make my own answer in like the most efficient way possible. What are the best practices for using ChatGPT to help develop courses, blogs, and content? Ultimately, it's got to be your brain juice that's driving things there. The proliferation of ChatGPT, one of the effects is it just massively devalues really mediocre written content, and Google's actually already super de-ranking stuff that is low quality. I shared the newsletter last week or the week before, basically a way to generate like 1,200 blog posts a day with AI in about 10 minutes. And it just does that on an automated basis every single day. So like that stuff is table stakes. You need to be thinking about, honestly, the same as before we had AI. How do I make this super valuable for a super specific type of person? And I don't know that AI is going to get you to something that is that good on its own. So the same rules apply here. I think get specific. Do I have a favorite AI tool for getting it to write in the style of someone? Trying to get it to jumpstart my blog posts. The more information you can give it and the more examples you can give it, the better. Actually, my favorite AI tool for writing right now is Claude. So just Google Claude, Claude. It's by a company called Anthropic. That's the one with the really big context limits, up to 150 pages. So if you've done this for years, the best thing you can do is like, here's my 20 favorite blog posts where I loved my tone of voice. Chuck those in there. And now it's obviously then it's got a huge history of what you sound like, and you can use that to generate more stuff. Thanks all for coming and hanging. If there's any questions we missed, I know there are a whole bunch. Feel free to reach out to me on social. I'm on pretty much all the platforms. And good luck out there. See y'all.